Hey everybody. Or it's only really meant for one person. You get the point. Uh, I'm going to be recording this kind of little series on how to animate using the vector-based software L2D Cubism, as well as the fundamentals behind it. So, as I said, animation using this program is completely based around vectors. The For example, Photoshop here uses pixels. You can see how I draw these lines and I zoom in. You can see how they get blurry, and finally you have the pixels, right? Vector-based software is different in the fact that everything is drawn using mathematical equations, which means you can infinitely zoom. I use Photoshop 2021 to prepare everything that I make. I just pirate it. If you're looking for something slightly more reliable, I recommend going for maybe like the 2019 version because it crashes less. Uh, that is truth. So here's what I'm working on right now. You can see that I've only have 2 layers started, but I'm not even going to get into layering today. Instead, I'm going to be talking about the fundamentals behind animation. Because before you start anything, you need to have a plan on how you're going to do this. So, plan for animating. You're going to need a couple things. Obviously, you're going to need layers. You cannot animate if you do not have the movable layers to apply meshes to. Technically, you do not need this, but if you don't have it, it looks like ass. You're going to need a background. And when I say background, I don't mean like a background here. I mean every single one of these layers should have at least part, if not all of it, redrawn. You can see that I started working on the left arm, the lower left arm. You can see I've redrawn all of the background here, but I haven't started on the hair yet. I'll get to that later in another section. But you can see how on the strap here, I've redrawn that area where the right dress strap was, because this is going to be a high movement object, so clearly it needs to be redrawn completely. It also covers a very small area. It's not like this left arm where, even though it's going to be rotating in this kind of 100-degree per se, I guess, section, not even, maybe like 60-degree section here, it's not going to be covering as much. So you have your layers, your background, and with that, that is all that you truly need to animate. There are other optional things that you can add, namely shadows. Anything that you're going to animate will look much better if you have shadows. For example, you can see how there is clearly a light source coming. So if you don't have a drawing tablet, I would recommend getting one. It makes animating and drawing literally anything, redrawing, 10 times easier. But you can clearly see here how there is one light source primarily behind and above her. You can see how the top of the head here is much brighter. You can see how areas along the wrists, back behind the hair, all that is much lighter. And you can also see how this dress strap here casts a shadow. Keep in mind, I did not redraw this. This was from the author. You can see how it casts a shadow on this forefront here, the right arm. Ideally, you would want to cut this out and make a new layer called dress strap shadow, where you're going to essentially motion track it along with the dress strap. So when it moves, this shadow will move as well. And then underneath that, you just redraw the base color. I'd probably sample something from right around here. So yes, shadows. When it comes to the layers, there's different complexities that you can create. You can either make, like, for example, if I open up the color spread here, you can see how I had two options. I could have just kept this entire arm as one pivot, or I could separate these two. And that's what I did. Having a general understanding of the human body helps a lot in animating. Generally, though, you're going to want to separate layers by joints, because whenever we move our bodies by joints, including like the wrist, neck, all that, whenever we move our bodies, we aren't robots. Everything moves slightly, and it will make your animations much more realistic if you have multiple joints moving. And the same goes to the hair. I could, ooh, I could easily go and make this entire bang here. That's pretty hard to see. Make this entire bang here one object and then apply a warp deformer to it. But instead, what I plan on doing is making each one of these strands here its own object. And by doing so, you kind of get that much more realistic movement in the hair, because you have multiple layers, multiple flowing objects. Yes. Now, once you have a plan and you've kind of laid it out how you want to do this, you have to figure out, what do I want to make move? This can be kind of hard. It really depends on, sometimes you can make stuff just on the fly. Like this one, not so much. I do have an entire, see, as you can see here, I have an entire plan laid out on how I want to do this. It's quite chaotic because nobody's going to be looking at this besides me. But you can see I have multiple plans here laid out on how I want to animate this. You can see how I'm kind of showing where I want these sleeves to move, where I'm going to be applying the mesh deformers, writing notes, try to update because my PSDs weren't working, animate the clouds. What is this? This is an arm. Did I finish this? Yes. Q. Oh no, this is not a Q. This is a rotation deformer. And I'm kind of measuring out how I want this to move, and then I decided, let's make the hand move. So you can see a well thought out plan leads to a easier process in the actual animating sequence, as you won't be going back and making more stuff. You can also see how I've laid out my breathing layer. We'll get to that later because that is a much kind of slightly more advanced, I guess, kind of subject to go over. So that is all I have for making a plan. Unfortunately, I do have to go to work soon, so I won't be actually doing anything for another day or so. But that's how you get started on making a animation.